So let's make sure we change our path though. Like space left, that's what we want. And again, we're going to play with these values a bit. This one will benefit just a bit from the large and extra large detail. Not quite so much on the fine detail. I don't want it to look too pitted. That should be good though. Export. This is the lower stair border, so this is these pieces of geometry here at the front, and I have them on left and the right side. They don't repeat the same texture, they're actually unique texture maps between these two pieces, as you can see here, but we do repeat them on the opposite side over here. And that's just because we don't repeat that texture on that piece of geometry, we repeat that texture on that piece of geometry, so it looks pretty much unique even though we're only using two texture maps. And again, this is quite a dirty piece of texture, so before I do that though, I must always remember to check my path here for the exported files to make sure it's going into the right folder. If you're just saving everything into the one folder, you don't have to keep changing your path here, but I like to keep things a bit more organized, so I have each piece of geometry in its own folder. Again, extra large detail, not benefiting so much. Large detail, we'll pull that up a bit. Fine detail is where we'll start to pick up some of this dirt and the stone pattern itself in the normal map. And the extra fine detail, same sort of thing. But I don't want to go too nuts with this. But we can afford to make the normal on this piece of geometry a little bit heavier, a little bit stronger, because it is such a dirty and worn piece of wall. So we'll update our integrator and do an export. We only have the one texture map in that piece, so we can move on. We have two texture maps here, so we'll be creating two separate normal maps for it. We can, because this is the same piece of geometry though, we can leave the settings we've set up for this piece, so we don't have to change any of these. We do have to change our path though. And update our integrator and export. Now we'll just load in the second color map. Again, I keep loading this texture, this model back in to check it just to make sure. That's fine. We'll update the integrator and then we'll export. Move on to our next piece of geometry. Okay, these are the lower stairs that are at the bottom of the model. Again, I'm going to make sure I change my path. And let's have a look here. This can probably benefit from having the large and extra large detail pulled up a bit more. because they're the texture itself is quite large. The pieces of geometry that it's simulating are quite large, so doesn't benefit so much this piece from the fine or the extra fine detail. So you could pull up your intensity on this if you wanted to make that look a lot more worn. I'm just looking at the steps front on so I can see what the normal map is doing through here. And I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to pull up my intensity on this piece to about 200. Because it's gnarly old stone, so a really heavy normal map will look good on this piece of geometry. Won't work for everything, like I said, but it works for this. And it's another reason why it's important to bring in, and why I like working in null, so I can bring in the mesh itself and have a look at it and play with it that way in real time. So make sure we changed our path here. We did, good. Let's update the integrator. We have our height and our ambient occlusion. Okay, now these are the lower terrace tiles. Going to pull that in. So these are these tiles down the bottom here. Those ones there. I'll pull in on the model a bit here so I can get a better view of it. Again, I'm going to make sure to change my path. Again, if you're just working in one directory, you won't have that problem. But because I have all these in their own folder, I have to keep changing my path here. Oh, you bought the software. You bought the software, Sniper Echo. I'm glad to hear that, because it's one of the best pieces of software I've come across for creating normal maps. If any of you guys work in game development and you do a lot of normal mapping, you want to create your ambient occlusion and your height maps, say from the Unreal Engine, this software is excellent. I've used bitmap to material that's made by Algorithmic, and while it's good software and I'm not dissing it in any way, this is better. It's because when you make your adjustments here on your normal map, all of this happens in real time. Bitmap to material that Algorithmic make, it's really sluggish. You can change one of your settings using that program, and it can take like up to 20 seconds before it sort of works it out. Whereas this, it does it straight away. And I've never come across anything as fast and as easy to use, which is the other reason I really like it. I like the menu. It's very easy to find things. I found bitmap to material can sometimes be a bit difficult to find bits and pieces, whereas this is all laid out nice and easy. Nice and clean. Just for any of you guys watching that are not sure exactly what I'm using here, I will go to their website and show you. So it's KNALD. Sniper Echo was saying he bought it. We were talking about it yesterday on stream. So I'm glad to hear that, Sniper Echo. You'll love using the software. It's worth every penny. It's not overly expensive. I mean, they have a free 30-day trial. This is their homepage. You can download a free 30-day trial for it if you don't want to try it out. If you're a freelancer, they only charge $100, and you can install it on 2 machines, so your desktop and your notebook, say, or whatever. Or if you're a studio, it's $200, which is still quite reasonable for 3D software. I mean, I know that those prices aren't cheap, but it's well worth it. It's a great piece of software, and the guys are worth supporting that made it. Just for any of you guys that might be interested in trying something else. There are free versions of things. You can get plugins for Photoshop that create normal maps if that's all you're interested in. Like I said, NVIDIA made one years ago, and it still does the job. All you're after is a normal map. you can certainly use it. You sat down with it today, Sniper Echo, and used both of them. It is really clean and really fast. I very rarely use bitmap to material anymore. This is my go-to program for creating normal maps from diffuse textures and creating ambient occlusion as well. Because as you guys know, I in my line of work I have to use a lot of different pieces of software, and I do. There are very few pieces of software I come back to time and time again, and Gnarled is one of them because it's just so useful. I could probably count. I'll show you exactly the software that I use on a regular basis, even though I have all the rest of the stuff that I have to use for different projects. Max is my go-to 3D software. Vue is my go-to environment rendering software. Again, they have a personal learning edition you can download and use for free if you want to try it out. Mari is my texturing software. Again, they have a free version you can download for non-commercial use and try it out. Photoshop, of course, which I use for everything. Video editing, I generally use After Effects and Premiere. And then SpeedTree I use for my for creating trees and bushes and all that sort of thing. Any plants, basically. No problem. Well, I'm glad to bring it to anyone's attention. I have nothing to do with the guys that make Gnarled. I just use their software and really like it. So that's just my opinion from someone that works in the 3D industry and has for many years. It's a great piece of software. It's not hellishly expensive like some of them are. So if you, like I said, if you do a lot of work where you're creating normal maps, it's worth the money if you can afford to buy it. The Bearded Bandit says Modo has been something environment artists are moving towards lately. It doesn't have the modifiers of 3D Studio Max though. Okay, I haven't used Modo. I haven't used Modo. I've heard good things about it. I used Max because number one, that's what I was trained on with. I do a lot of architectural visualization work, and Max is the program they all use. If you're doing any ArchViz work, it's Max. They don't generally use Maya. They will use Cinema 4D as well, but Max is the predominant for ArchViz. And I know the program. I've been using it for so long. I should start learning other pieces of 3D software though. I have basics of them all down, but Max is my go-to daily work program, so basically for work. Even the stuff I've done for game studios, I've always used Max. A lot of the other guys will use Maya. The last game studio I worked full-time at, they use both. They use Maya and Max. Some guys like Maya, some guys like Max. They let you use what you're comfortable with, generally. ArchViz is a bit different though. They want you to use Max because it integrates with all the CAD programs really well. Even though Autodesk own Maya, and they're slowly bringing Maya into that CAD ecosystem, Max was always in that ecosystem. So Bearded Bandit says, do I know any must-have scripts for Max? Well, ScriptSpot is the place to go to for Max scripts. There are thousands of them. Must-have scripts, it depends on what version of Max you want to be using. If you're using an older version, then maybe some of these scripts to help with UV mapping could be useful. Max's latest versions, 2016 and 2017. The UV mapping is pretty good. They've updated all of that, so scripts aren't really needed there anymore. I tend not to use too many scripts. I haven't found a need to use too many in Max, personally, in my workflow. I don't know if you were on stream earlier when I was saying I did create a script for Max myself that I use occasionally, which takes models, plants that you create in SpeedTree and converts them so you can use them in Eon View. I'll use that occasionally. Generally not though, but ScriptSpot is the place to go to if you're looking for good scripts for Max. You can have a look at their top 10 or most downloaded and get an idea that way. Personally though, I don't generally use a lot of scripts. or if I do, I'll write it myself. So yeah, and that's just because I have come from a programming background as well. When I was studying, I did programming and design. So yeah, no, I can't say I really must have scripts. There were ones for UV mapping though that used to be really useful for Mac in older versions of Mac. The newer versions, like I said, they've improved their UV manager workflow. So go to Script Spot though, you'll find a lot of interesting stuff there. Just depending on what you need, what you want. Like I know they've got scripts to create tiles for roofs and all that sort of thing. That was one of the other reasons Max was used so much in ArchViz, because it has a lot of things built into it to create things like doors and window frames and that type of thing. Stairs, for instance. That was all built into Max from the start. And they did that because it's used so much in architectural visualization to make those guys' lives easier. Which is why it's still used a lot in ArchViz. Just because of those built-in tools. I mean, you don't need to use a tool to make a set of stairs, but having the tool there is handy and quick to make stairs. So. Are you saying it's cool you're not trying not to use scripts at all and learn to do the UVing manually? The same with materials? What's a good way to go? You don't want to just learn Substance Designer, but rather Sculpt instead. Okay. Yeah, well, that's a good point to make. Substance Designer creates physically based materials. It's different to Substance Painter. Substance Painter is a bit more like Mari, where you're actually painting textures for your models. Substance Designer is more for creating physically based materials that you can assign to your model. Car paint, that sort of thing. But it's always a good habit not to rely on scripts too much as well. A lot of studios you work in won't like you using scripts. Basically because they're working in a commercial environment and they don't want any legal problems with using a script that you may have downloaded from somebody else. So if you can, they always prefer you to work with bog standard 3D program, whatever that be, whether that's Max or Maya or anything like that. Not all studios, some are more strict than others, but if you can get into the habit of working without using scripts, it's always better. You'll learn more that way anyway. Like I said, you can download a script that'll tile a roof for you in 2 seconds by hitting a button. And if you're on a deadline, maybe that's good, but it's always better if you can do it yourself by hand. It's good practice for you. And you'll probably get a better result in the end anyway, doing it manually by hand. Otherwise, everybody's work would end up looking the same if everyone used scripts. You wouldn't get any variety. But like I said, I'm not saying scripts are bad to use. All I'm saying is it's always better to learn to do it without a script, if you can. Some things you can't. And that was why I created a script to convert the trees from speed tree to view, because there was no other way to do it using Max. So yeah, anything that can enhance your workflow is good. I wouldn't necessarily use scripts to replace your workflow, though. Put it that way. So let's see what we're doing here. Did I change my path? Yes, I did. Again, this one's not going to benefit from the large or extra large detail. I might pull up the medium detail a bit. Go to the extra fine detail here, and this is the one that's really going to start depicting this model. Now, I know it's hard to see on this, even having the actual model loaded up, it can be difficult to see exactly what it's doing, but if you're making adjustments on a piece of geometry like this where you're not really sure, look at the sections of your texture where it may be a little bit more obvious, like this dirt mark around the outside here. You can see how the normal map will be affecting it if you concentrate more on this sort of area through here as opposed to back here. So normal map all the way on. Now I just need to check that the normals are facing the right way on this. They are, that's alright. I do that by checking the grout here to make sure that that's going down and not out. I'm going to pull it in just until we start to get a bit of a three-dimensional look there to the edge of the tile that's running along the grout here. We are up at 200% here on the intensity, which I probably will leave at, but we'll pull it back and just check to see what it's going to do. Yeah, that's way too much, but you get the idea. It gives you a good visual as to what's going on. I'm just going to pull up the intensity until I think it's too far, and then I'm going to pull it back. To around about there, so that's around 190% intensity, so that's quite a heavy normal map, but it will benefit because of the grouting here, so, and the dirt mark, the dirt on the tile. So I may pull it back just a little bit actually. I may take it back to about 160 should be good. And we'll update our integrator. Check our height and our ambient occlusion and export. We've only got the one texture to worry about, so let's move on. Now this column uses two textures. I'll show you what I mean when I load this model up. It's going to look a bit funky because FBX in Null is having a bit of a problem with multi-materials. Nothing you can't work around, and I'll show you what I mean. Basically this column uses two materials, one for the top and the bottom, and then a separate one for the interior, for the column itself. And you see how the texture is all messed up here? That's not going to affect what we do. We can still and it's not a problem with the texture because those are these columns just here. So you can see that there's no problem with the texture. It's just when it loads, when Null is loading that mesh into the program, because it's using two textures, it's getting a bit confused. So that's the reason that's happening. But we're not really worrying about the model in Null. We're only using the model to get an idea of what the normal map's going to look like. So for what we're doing, that's fine. We'll fix the interior up on the next when we load up the next texture map. So let's change our path here though. It's just something to be aware of if you're using Null and you are importing geometry that's multi-material. If you're only using one material, it won't be a problem. It only happens with multi-materials here in this program. And you can work around it, it's not a problem. We've changed our path. I'm going to pull back my intensity here to around about 90, which is generally where I work. And let's start playing with our details here. I'm not going to use any extra large detail. I'm not going to use any large detail. I'm not going to use any medium detail either. I'm only going to go with fine and extra fine detail here. Again, because all of this detailing here is actually geometry that's modeled in. That's a texture, but that's not just a texture you're seeing. That's actually been physically modeled into the geometry, and that was done in ZBrush. So you don't need medium, large or extra large detail here. Just going to pull up to make that stand out a bit more. That looks good. Let's update our integrator and do an export. Now let's load up the texture for the middle of the column, which is this one here. Again, we'll just load up our column. And again, it's made the top and the bottom funky because we've replaced the texture, but the middle is showing up, which is all we need, like I said, to judge how our normal map is going to look there. We don't have to change our export path because they're both in the same folder. I will pull up on the large and extra large detail a bit here. And I'm also going to pull in a bit on the extra fine detail. Let's see if intensity being raised might. No, we don't want to pull up our intensity too much. So I'm going to go to 80 on our intensity here. Again, we don't need to fake the 3D look through here through a normal map, because that is actually 3D geometry that's been the mesh has actually been created, so we don't need so much to fake it here. Again, if you're bringing this into a game engine, you could probably reduce that out and use the normal map more in that if you're doing that, but for what we're doing for a render and view, we don't need to worry about that. Let's update our integrator. Just check our textures here and do an export. Okay, let's move on to the next piece of geometry. Okay, this one's got 3 columns, and that's obviously because we have used the mesh quite a bit in the model. Let's see what the mesh is. Alright, this is the columns that run around the top here. So it's all of these small pieces of geometry, and there are quite a few of them that run all the way around the outside of the model. Again, so what I've done is I've created 3 versions, 3 textures for that one piece of geometry, and then I've just varied it around and rotated them 180 degrees in different spots to make it look unique. So let's update our export path. Again, extra large detail, no. Large detail, no. Maybe just a little bit. Medium detail, a little bit more. And again, I've pulled in the extra fine detail just till I start seeing that rough look happening here of the stone, just in spots. So that should be quite good. Let's update our integrator. Export. Now we can leave our settings here because the same, because we're using the same piece of geometry. I'm just going to choose the next diffuse texture for that model. Like I said, I'm going to load the model up again to check that those settings are fine. They should be, but I always like to double check. And that looks okay. And the last texture map here for this one. And that looks okay. Move on to the next piece of geometry. Okay, these are the stairs that the stairs here are created in 2 separate pieces. We have the step here at the back, which is the one we've got working on at the moment in Gnarled. And then we have the stairs themselves, which are separate pieces of geometry which I've placed on top of the actual stairwell, so that we have a bit of an overhang happening on the step. You see what I mean here? The stairs actually slightly overhang the back of the step. I created that in 2 separate pieces, so it looked more natural. Also remember to soften up the edges of your steps because they're going to be worn. So yeah, stairs were made in 2 pieces so that the stairs themselves look more natural together as one piece. as opposed to just trying to model that geometry into one piece of mesh. So this is the back of the step, not the actual steps themselves. Change our path. And let's play with our normal map here. This one will benefit from large and extra large detail as well. And less so on the fine, but we're going to leave it at about, we'll make it about 90% actually, intensity. Update the integrator. And export. Let's move on to the next one. These are the tops of the stairs. That's the back of the step. These are actually going to be the tops of the stairs. And this is the other advantage of creating it in two separate pieces of geometry. Instead of using one piece of geometry, you can tailor your normal mapping to the actual geometry itself. It gives you more options. So instead of just using one normal map, now we can use two to make them look unique. So let's change our path. Step tops, that's the one we want. These ones are not benefiting so much from the extra large detail. Not so much from the large detail, although I'll bring it up a little bit. Or the medium detail so much. Fine detail and extra fine detail. Again, I'm looking here at the dirt on the edges of these steps here, more than anything. Well, so around through here. Our intensity, we can probably pull that up a bit more. So no intensity, too much intensity. We're just going to go to a happy medium here. Maybe like something like that. So we just see some rough dirt mark happening here and there without going too extreme. So we're at 120% on our intensity. We're going to update the integrator. Ambient occlusion, height, that all looks good. And export. Okay, I think we're nearly at the end of our pieces of geometry here. We've only got 3 more to go. 2 textures for this piece. Okay, these are our straight banisters that we're using at the front here, and we created 2 textures because we have 2 of them, and I wanted the textures to look unique. We couldn't get away with just rotating 180 degrees on this one. But our intensity to begin with is too much. Let's change our path. And let's pull our intensity down to about 90 before we start playing with anything else. Again, I know these aren't really going to benefit from large or extra large detail. I'm going to pull back on the medium detail. Pull back a bit more on the fine detail. And just pull in on the extra fine detail until I think it looks right. That should be good. Let's update our integrator. Export. Move on to our next one, which is this second diffuse texture. Again, I'm just going to load in my mesh to make sure. That all looks fine. Okay, next piece of geometry. Okay, this is the base of that of the model. Let me just load this mesh up and then we'll jump into max. So this is actually that really large base piece here that runs all the way around the outside. I'm going to pull in a bit here so we get a bit better of a view, change my path. Now I'm not going to pull in on the extra large detail here too much, or at all really, all the large detail. Going to pull up just a little on the medium detail, a little bit more on the fine detail, and then the extra fine detail. I'm looking at around here in the model while I'm doing this. I just want to start seeing this pitted look for stone. You've just got to be careful because I painted in this watermark that runs along the wall. You don't want to go too heavy, otherwise that'll stick out a bit too much. Maybe something like that. Again, our intensity though, we're going to leave it 90. Update the integrator. This is quite a large texture too. This is a 4K texture, and the reason for that is because this is such a large piece of geometry. It runs all the way around the outside of the terrace, so it needed a large texture. So these are 4K textures. Let's export those. I think we only have one more piece of geometry left to do, which is the upper tiles. And again, this is another 4K texture because it's this tile work up the top here, and again it's a large piece of geometry. It needed a high resolution texture. We'll just load up our mesh here, change our path. Again, this one will benefit from large and extra large detail a bit more. Less so on the fine detail, but we do want some fine detail. And our intensity, we don't want to pull it up too much. Taking my intensity to about 50. Update the integrator. Check our height and our ambient occlusion and export. Again, this is a 4K normal map because it exports the same size as whatever the texture map is. Now, if this were a game model, I certainly would reduce this to 2K, the normal map. 4K normal maps is a bit of overkill. I may leave them at 4K though when we're doing the render in view, because that's less of a problem. But when we take the model into Unreal, I may reduce them down. But for the moment, we'll leave them as 4K, I think. I think that'll probably be it for today though, guys. I think we've done all of our pieces of geometry, so tomorrow when I come back on, we can start attaching all these different pieces in Max so that we can do an export of this model and bring it into Eon View so that we can start setting up the materials in View so we can do some beauty renders. We've got to make the 3D environment as well. We've got to settle that up. So our plan of attack for tomorrow will be attaching all these different pieces of geometry as one mesh, except for the angel statues and the vines. I want them separate. So we'll attach everything as one mesh. We can export the model so we can import it into Eon View and start working on fixing up some of the materials in View before we start creating a full-on 3D environment for it and doing some beauty renders using radiosity in View. The model will start to look quite different once it's rendered in view as well, because when we start, this is only a very sort of low res viewport that Max is showing you, just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. When we start rendering it up in view, we're going to be using a full-on radiosity rendering engine with atmosphere and all that type of thing. So it's going to end up changing the look of the model quite a bit. It'll make it look better, hopefully, than what you see here, particularly once we get it into context of a 3D environment with vegetation, because the colour from the vegetation will start to affect the model as well. Once we set up our 3D environment, our environment itself. But I think I will leave it there for today. I will be back on again tomorrow at 5 PM Pacific time in the US, 12 PM in Australia, 1 AM in the UK. If you're not sure when I'm live, you can always keep an eye on my Twitter page at PhilDoes3D, because I always post 15 minutes before I'm about to go live there. So yeah, keep an eye out there if you're not sure, but my schedule is always the same. I'm always on at 5 PM Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday US time on Twitch. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me. It's been been a pleasure talking to you in chat. I always like chatting to you guys. Like I said, if any of you guys, when I'm streaming, have any work you want to show me or want me to look at or want my opinion on, I'm more than happy to do that, because that's why I'm here. I'm not here just to work on my own stuff. I'm here to look at anything that you guys are working on. Good night, Sniper Echo. Well, you're quite welcome for the stream. I enjoyed it. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night, and yeah, see you later, guys.